Friends, I welcome you all to our today's session. This is in fact the fourth session on the concept of supply. And you already know that how the supply term is very important in the context of GST. Only when there is a supply, there will be GST liability, right? And you also know the supply can be for goods and also it can be for services. Both the things are covered under GST law. And last session we are also discussing about this thing. The meaning of supply is very wide, and law has given you an inclusive definition only. It has only said supply includes so many things. Okay, it also uses the word such as. That means these are only examples of supplies. There might be many other kind of supply which is not you can say expressed in the definition. But okay, now friends, let us move. If you quickly recapitulate it, recapitulate what we are learning, what we have learned so far, you see, we already know that the taxable event in the GST law is supply. And in that context, it can be supply of goods and services. The definition of goods we have understood, definition of services we have understood. We'll again analyze these definitions. Okay, goods includes actionable claim, that also you understood. Principal agents relationship, meaning of family. This meaning of definition is also important for us. We have discussed this thing earlier. Meaning of business, because there is a here there is a requirement that supply has to be related to business in the course of or for the furtherance of business. Supply has to be made. So therefore, that we need to understand. Consideration also plays a very important role to decide whether a particular transaction is a supply or not. Meaning of agent, meaning of manufacturer we have discussed. What is money we have discussed. What is taxable supply, taxable territories we have discussed. Meaning of person we have seen. Who is a recipient in different situations where consideration is payable, where no consideration is payable. Both the things we were discussing in our last session. Okay, for goods as well as services. Then we started learning the concept of supply, and regarding that, we are learning section 7, section 8. We have not learned. We'll be learning after covering section 7 only. We'll be going to section 8. Now, section 7, now people read once again. It says supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both. That means there is a possibility that in a particular one supply may include both. It can be a composite supply or mixed supply also, right? And it includes sale, both such as. You see this word such as is there, which itself indicates that these are examples of sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, disposals made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. This is also important. In the course or furtherance of business, it should be in the course of business or furtherance of business. So nexus with business is relevant. Consideration is also important. Okay, and also we know imputation of service for a consideration or not for a consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. If services are imported for a consideration, it may be or may not be in the course or furtherance of business. Still, it will be regarded as so. There are certain activities which are included in Schedule 1, which can be considered as supply, even if it is without consideration. Now, this is the example. These are the Schedule 1 items. You can just have a look. Of course, we had seen it in our previous classes. So these are the activities which are treated as supply, even if made without consideration. Okay, we have discussed all this concept, so I'm not repeating it now. Okay. Now you see, these are the activities. This is now we are coming to Schedule 2 of section 7. Schedule 2, which should be read with section 7. It says activities to be treated as supply of goods or supply of services. In certain situation, which situation it will be treated as supply of goods and which situation it will be treated as supply of services. That has been classified here. Okay, whether it will be treated as goods or whether it is treated as services, we can refer to schedule 2 to understand that. Okay, schedule 2 has got all these items. We have discussed all these things. Okay, then come to schedule 3. Schedule 3 talks about the activities and transaction which shall be treated neither as supply of goods nor as supply of services. This schedule also we have seen they are neither supply of goods nor supply of services. Previous class we have covered this thing. Okay, and one more concept that is there in section 7 subsection 3. It says subject to subsection 1, 1A and 2, the government may, on recommendation of the council, specify by notification the transaction which are to be treated as a supply of goods, not as supply of services, or supply of services, not as supply of goods. Government can also bring notification that these are supply of goods, these are not supply of services. Or the notification can also say these are supply of services, not as supply of goods. That is also there. Now, if you start analyzing, you can find out that definition of supply was inclusive. It has used the word such as the supply of goods and services both only attract tax. Okay, goods will attract, services will apply, or services will also attract GST. And if the supply is both, that goods as well as services, that will also attract GST. Monies and securities will not attract GST. Can you tell me why? Why money and securities will not attract GST? Can anyone give me answer? Supply of money or supply of securities? These transactions do not attract GST. Can anyone give me reply? There is reason is very simple, because money and securities are not goods. They are also not services. And you know, supply should be made for consideration, but of course exceptions are there. We have seen those exceptions. Supply should be made in the course or furtherance of business. That is also important. Supply should be made by a taxable person. Supply should be a taxable supply. These two concepts also we have to discuss: what is taxable person, what is taxable supply. And this chart also we have seen. Now, when these are the normal concepts, there are few exceptions which you are well aware of. First exception is that certain transactions are deemed to be supply even without consideration. We have seen the schedule 1. We have seen the list of transactions which are deemed to be supply even if there is no consideration. Okay, I think that you'll understand, you'll agree to it. Then, import of services for consideration, not in course or furtherance of business, are also supply. If services are imported and it's for a consideration, not in course or furtherance of business, still it is supply. Certain transactions are kept out of supply even if the parameters are exist. That means they are neither supply of goods nor supply of services. And certain activities are treated either supply of goods or supply of services. And certain transactions can be notified and to be treated as supply of goods, not services, and vice versa. This is the summary that we have learned so far. Okay. Now, if you further analyze the definition of supply, you will understand it gives an inclusive definition. It doesn't give any exhaustive idea that what exactly constitutes supply, but it includes so many things. It gives illustrations that these are the supplies. Okay. And these are various parameters of the supply. If you carefully go through the section 7 of CGSTR, you will say supplies should be of goods or services. Supply of anything other than goods or services like money, securities, etc. does not attract GST. Supply has to be made for consideration, subject to certain exceptions. Supply has to be made in the course or furtherance of business. This is also important, again, subject to certain exception. Importation of services is an exception. Now, there are certain exceptions to the parameter 2 and 3. Even if these are the broad parameters, you can see these are essential things. It should be goods or services or both. Consideration. Third one is the course or furtherance of business. There are exceptions to parameter 2 and 3. Parameter 2 and 3, if you see, that supply can be without consideration. Okay, supply may not be related to business in case of import of services. Okay, and there are also cases where transactions are kept out of supply despite the existence of above parameters. Therefore, the schedule is there, which says they are neither supply of goods nor supply of services. And we have already seen certain things are classified as supply of goods or as supply of services. Government has also got power to notify the transaction to be treated as supply of goods, not as supply of services, and vice versa. Now, having understood all these things, having understood all these parameters and exceptions to that, now, if you try to summarize this exact structure of supply, this chart may be helpful to you. And if you carefully have a look at this chart, you must be seeing that supply includes all these things 1, 2, 3, 4, and it excludes one particular list which is called as negative list. Just have a look. Okay, so please first you see supply includes. Can you read the first part, this box? Some of you please read it. Supply includes first one. Quickly, some of you please read it. Unmute and talk.
Supply for consideration in course or furtherance of business, section 7.
Yes. So this is important. Okay. It should for consideration in course or furtherance of business. The terms are important. So this is one thing. Supply includes a supply which is for a consideration in the course and furtherance of business. This is section 7.1a. The section 7.1b includes some more thing. Please read it.
Importation of services for consideration whether or not in course of furtherance of services.
Okay, if services are imported, importation of services for consideration, whether or not in the course of furtherance of business. So you have to remember these things. Services can be imported even if it is not in consideration and not related to the business, not in course of business, not in furtherance of business. Still, it can be considered as. And third one is
supply without consideration.
Yeah, that is there in schedule 1. Without consideration, there are also supply. And fourth one,
activities to be treated as supply of goods or supply of services.
Yeah, that is schedule 2 contains all these things. So all these schedules are important. Schedule 1 and 2. And if you see schedule 3, it gives a negative list. They are neither supply of goods nor supply of services. So to understand the complete meaning of supply, not only you have to read section 7, you have to 7, also read schedule 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And here again, it is important for us to understand the concept of goods and services. Okay. Because if a particular, if goods or services are both are not supplied, then GST is not getting attractive. We have already seen the definition of the goods. Now, if you look at this picture, it says goods means, this means this is not an inclusive list, this exhaustivity has been defined. Goods means every kind of movable property and includes actionable claim, growing crops, grass, or things attached to or forming a part of land, which are agreed to be served before supply or under a contract of supply. So this is the goods, but it excludes money and securities. This you have to. And coming to definition of services, here also the word used is the means. That means it is again exhaustive definition. Means anything other than goods and includes use of money and converts of money by cash or by other mode from one form or currency or denomination to another, for which is separate constitution is charged. But services also excludes money and securities. So these terms are important so that you can distinguish whether it's a goods and services. Okay, this distinction is important because what happens sometimes government exempts or gives some concession to certain goods, supply of certain goods or certain services. Even if GST law includes both goods and services, but if the exemption is for services, then only when it is service, then it will be exempted. Or let us say exemption is for goods, then only when it is a supply of goods, then only it can be exempted, or it can avail that benefit. Okay, that is the concept of supply. Now, further, if we try to analyze this thing, okay, the first part of the section 7 includes all forms of the supply. So, one by one, we'll be discussing this thing, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, disposals, made or agreed to be made for a constitution in the course or further services. You see all these terms, which you can see in this part. But this should be for consideration. And one more thing about consideration you have to remember, you have covered this thing, that consideration did not flow from the recipient. Consideration can be paid by a third party also. That's also consideration. Okay, so all these transactions for consideration in the course of further services are supplied. Okay, this is the essence. Now this is time to understand these terms. So these terms, if you see, these are listed here. Various forms of supply which are contemplated in section 7.1 are sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rentals, lease, or disposal. Okay, and since the word such as is there, that means these are illustrative. And these terms, what is sale, what is transfer, what is barter, what is the exchange, license? Do you understand the meaning of this, or you have any doubt about it? Sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental. Do you understand, or any doubt you have?
So can you tell the disposal part?
Okay, disposal. Yeah, other terms are clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, friends, we will be discussing all of them. Don't worry, by only disposal. Why it is necessary to discuss all these terms? Because these terms are not defined. It is not defined under GST law. Neither GST Act nor any state GST Act defines this. So you have to understand the natural meaning. Right? So one by one we'll be discussing. None of these terms has been defined. So each of these terms will be discussed. First, let us see what is the meaning of sale and transfer. Okay, so since it is not defined, first let us refer to dictionary. Dictionary says the transfer of ownership of title of the property from one person to another person for a price. Dictionary means you have to refer to law dictionary, the legal dictionary. So when the ownership of title is transferred, we can refer that is the sale. And it should be for a price. That is one way of understanding this thing by referring to dictionary. Okay, why you are referring dictionary? Because it has not been defined in the act. Okay, another way is that we can also refer to Sale of Goods Act. Sale of Goods Act 1930 says a contract of sale of goods is a contract whereby the seller transfers or agrees to transfer the property in goods to the buyer for a price. That means the property in goods gets transferred by the seller to the buyer for a price. Then only it is sale under sale of goods. Now, what is transfer? Transfer has been defined in the Black's Law Dictionary. If you refer, it says convey or remove from one place, person, etc. to another. It also means pass or hand over from one to another, especially to make over the possession or control of. That means for shifting possession or for shifting control, if you are moving something from one place to another place, by doing that, control is transferred. The other, suppose I am giving you this mobile phone, transferring to you, I'm giving it to you, moving it, giving it in your hand. And by doing this, what happens? Control is transferred. Then you have all the controls. Whatever you want, you can do it. So that is transfer. Okay, when position is transferred, for transferring control, that is transfer. So this is how we'll understand the meaning of sale with reference to a dictionary as well as with reference to law dictionary, and also Sale of Goods Act 1930. Now coming to barter and exchange. This is a concept, that's the exchange of goods and services for aftermarket. Okay, something you are giving, and in return you are getting something else. You might have to pay differential price. You may pay, may not. So again, if you refer to Black's Law Dictionary, it defines exchange is an act of giving or taking one thing for another. Okay. And the meaning of barter is exchange of goods and services for other goods and services instead of using money. You are not paying any money, but you are exchanging. Okay, for example, let us say most of us are familiar with this kind of example. You are exchanging your old car and getting a new car, and consideration is adjusted. That is an example of exchange. Okay, barter, normally money is not involved. Okay, I am giving you my mobile and you are giving me your laptop. That is barter. Okay, understood. This is barter and exchange. Okay, and this can be both in goods and services also. Goods, I told you an example of exchange of car. One car is exchanged for another car. Okay, now if you take an example of services, you see, suppose a doctor is providing free medical service, not free, exactly, providing consultancy service to barber, and the barber is giving a free haircut to the doctor. This is an example of barter of service. Okay, in service sector also, barter is applicable. Now, next term is little complicated. You may feel this is about the license, lease, rentals, disposal. If you refer to the dictionary meaning of license, it is a permission granted by a competent authority to do something. Permission authority has given you a license to do something. Let us say to open a drugstore or to do mining activities. But license should come from the competent authority to engage in a business or occupation or in an activity which is otherwise unlawful. That means without that license, if you do it, it will become unlawful. That is license. Okay. Right. And you are asking the meaning of disposal. So disposal also, you see, it is not defined anywhere. So you have to refer to the dictionary. If you refer to the Black's Law Dictionary, it defines disposal as the sale, pledge, giving away, use, consumption, or other disposition of a thing. So this is the meaning of disposal. That means something you are doing to dispose it off, to give away. That is the meaning of disposal. Since Legal definition is not there, so we don't have any other option. We have to refer to the law dictionary to understand the meaning. Is it clear to you, disposal?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Had the term been defined in the law, then we could have stick to the definition. But since it is not defined, so we are referring to the law dictionary. The dictionary meaning of rental equivalent. It is an arrangement to rent something or amount of money that you pay to rent something. So something is, that means someone is using your property, using some goods and rent is paid. I think rent we all are quite familiar. And the meaning of lease is to make a lease agreement by which money is paid to other for use of land, building, vehicle, piece of equipment. So all these things can be leased out and money can be collected. It's one agreement. That is called as lease. Under GSTs, all these things, that is licenses, leases, rentals, okay, rentals of goods with or without transfer of the right to use covered under supply services, because there is no transfer of title in title of supplies. When title is not transferred, it is not supply of goods, it is supply of services. Okay, such transactions are specifically treated as supply of services under Schedule 2 of GST. If title is transferred, it is supply of goods. If title is not transferred, it is supply of services. This you have to remember. Okay. And also now you need to understand what is the meaning of consideration, which we have covered earlier anyway. Please remember that consideration doesn't always mean money. It can be in kind also. Okay, certain non-monetary benefits can also be called as consideration. Consideration did not always flow from the recipient of the supply. That's what I was telling you earlier also. It need not flow from the recipient. It may come from the third party. Subsidy given by the central government or state government is not considered as consideration. So if you read the definition of the consideration, it specifically excludes the subsidy given by central government or state government. But if the subsidy or any kind of grant is coming from some other authorities other than state government and central government, it will be definitely included as consideration. Sometimes what happens, money is paid by way of deposit. Suppose you are availing, you are buying some goods or availing certain services and you are depositing some money with the providers. Then what will happen? You are depositing some money. That deposit of money will not be regarded as what? Consideration. But when the deposit money is applied for supply of goods or services, at that point of time, it will be considered as consideration. For example, you are regularly buying some goods and you have deposited 1 lakh rupees. It is deposit, it's not consideration. But the supplier is, let us say, applying that deposit. You have supplied something, he said, out of this 50,000 rupees applied for supply of goods. Then the 50,000 rupees is the consideration. So long as deposit is not applied for the supplies, that will not be treated as consideration. But when that is applied for the applied, then it will be treated as consideration. Is it clear to you? Okay. I'm giving you a case example. Certain artworks are sent by artists to galleries for exhibition. Artist is sending his artwork to an exhibition for display. Question is it supply? Goods, you see, goods are transported by the artist to the exhibition. Answer is it is not a supply because no consideration is involved. The exhibition doesn't pay anything. But when the artwork is sold in the exhibition, there is a supply because there is a consideration. Did you understand this example? Supply of artwork by the artist to the galleries is not supply. But at the gallery, when the artwork is sold, then consideration flows to the artist. At that point of time, that is a supply. I think it is clear to you. Now, if you look at the consideration, you can understand this payment in money or otherwise for the supply. Deposits are to be considered as payments only when the supplier applies the deposit for consideration for the said supply. Okay. And this consideration may be paid by the recipient or by any other person. It excludes the subsidy which is given by the central government and state government. Consideration includes monetary value of any act or forbearance for supply. Supply, so consideration can be in cash, can be in kind. In that case, the monetary value of that you can say non-monetary supply, non-monetary consideration can be taken into account. Okay. Any transaction involving supply of goods and services without consideration is not a supply unless it is deemed to be a supply under Schedule 1 of CGST Act. You have seen the CGST Act Schedule 1. It says certain transactions shall be deemed to be supply even if it is without consideration. Okay. And one more parameter is also important. Supply should be made in the course or furtherance of business. And what is the meaning of this course and furtherance of business? So we'll be discussing all these things in our next session. But to have clear idea about that thing, one more thing is important is that we'll be again understanding the meaning of business so that we can able to link it, that whether a particular supply is in the course or furtherance of business. Hope today we have fairly understood a substantial portion of the definition of supply. But it's not at over. We'll be continuing it in our next session. Okay, is it clear to you after this? Thank you very much. We'll catch up in our next session. Thanks a lot.